we will go ahead and get started. First of all, my name is Gladys Cornell, and I'm with AIM Consulting, and we are helping the city of Roseville with their public and stakeholder engagement for the Roseville Commercial Corridors project. Want to thank everybody for taking their time this evening to join us, and we look forward to having a robust discussion with you. We're excited to introduce the planning work that the City of Roseville's planning staff is initiating for these three key corridors within Roseville. Just really quickly, those three corridors are Atlantic Street, Douglas Boulevard and Harding Boulevard, Douglas Boulevard and Sunrise Avenue. Lauren Hawker, the city's planning division manager, will provide more background about the plans, their objectives, and the overall process shortly. But before we get started, I'd like to provide a brief meeting orientation. So I just wanted to walk through a few items. So tonight we have three main goals that we would like to accomplish with you. First, we'd like to share information about the plans and the process, and also answer any questions that you may have about the plans or the process. And then we'd like to have a robust discussion about the corridors. And in particular, given this early phase of the process, we're going to like to have a discussion around trying to understand what you like about these corridors, what you find challenging about these corridors, and maybe what your aspirations are for these corridors. Because we are hosting this meeting virtually, we are slightly constrained on how we can make this as interactive as possible. So throughout the meeting, please feel free to use the chat box feature in your Zoom application to share any questions and comments you may have. And so just to direct you to where the chat box is, if you've not used Zoom yet before, which I'm anticipating probably most of you have, but just in case, if you look at the bottom of your screen of the Zoom application, you'll see the chat box icon. Just click that. And then you can go ahead and type in any question or comment you have, and we will be monitoring the chat box as we are going through the different presentations. So, you know, don't feel like you need to wait for that. Just go ahead and post your questions or make your comments in that chat box. Please don't forget to hit return, because then it will send the message to us. And at specific intervals, we will pause and review the chat box to answer any questions. Also, when we do pause at those specific intervals, if you would prefer to ask your question, then we would ask that you please raise your virtual hand. The reason we ask for that is we have a substantial amount of people participating. And if you raise your virtual hand, then you will automatically pop up to the top and we can see you that way. Zoom doesn't make it easy for us. If you're using different devices, the location of the raised hand icon can be in different locations. So bear with me, I'm just gonna go through it so that if you are on a different device, you'll know where the raised hand icon is. So if you're on a phone, what you'll want to do is look to see where that little more button is if you see the slide, it's at the top of the top right hand corner, the more button with the three little dots. If you click that, you'll see at the very top raise hand, and then you just click that and your raised hand will pop up. If you're on a tablet, same thing, you just see the three button more and click it and you'll see the raised hand. On the computer, you may have two options. It'll either be in the participants, where if you click that, you can see it'll pop up and say raised hand, and then just go ahead and click it. Or if you have a reactions button, you can click that and it'll have a raised hand icon there. Or if you don't want to use that and you want to use a clapping hands or a thumbs up or something like that, go ahead. You'll pop up automatically and we'll be able to see you. Okay. One last thing, if you are not on a smartphone, but on just a regular cell phone, just hit press star 9, and that will automatically give us a raised hand icon. I also want to just mention, I know with me, sometimes when I have these meetings, I have aha moments after I've left the meeting. So if you do, we have an email address. It's corridorplans, that's with an S, at roseville.ca.us, and you can share additional thoughts that you may have after the meeting. So with that, I'd like to just review the agenda really quick of what we're going to be talking this evening. As I mentioned, Lauren's going to go through and introduce the Roseville Commercial Corridors project. And then after that, after we've answered any questions anybody may have regarding her presentation, we're then going to break up into a small group for a discussion regarding community values and visioning exercise. And then we'll bring everybody back together and we will have a quick wrap up and share kind of what the next steps are. Again, if you want, we do have a website for this. It's roseville.ca.us/corridor plans with an S. And that offers more information about this project. I'd like to quickly introduce the project team that we have here tonight. And if they have a chance, when I say their name, if they wouldn't mind just waving, that everybody can put a face with a name. So Lauren Hawker with the City of Roseville is the Planning Division Project Manager. Gina McCall is with City of Roseville, and she is the planner for Douglas Harding Corridor. Shelby Maples is also with the City of Roseville, and she is the planning manager for the Atlantic Street Corridor. And Sean Morales with the City of Roseville is the planning manager for the Douglas Sunrise Corridor. Eric Smith is here with Mark Thomas, and he is assisting on the landscape plans. Celia McAdams is with AIM, Nicole Porter, Elise Brockett, Hannah Schuden, Emily Kandre, and Miriam Abbas.
Thank you. Yeah, before I start any screen sharing, just want to reintroduce myself. I am Lauren Hawker, planner with the City of Roseville, and I'm managing the overall project. And then we've got our 3 planners who are the lead planners for each of the plan areas. So I have a short presentation for you. I promise it's not excessively long. But yeah, I'm here because I want to make sure to give you basically an overview of and set the stage, explain what this project is and where we're going with it and what we're hoping to achieve with your help. So this is a planning process where we work with all segments of the community to come up with a document that lays out the vision for the future of these corridors. Through this process, we have the opportunity to prioritize improvements and encourage revitalization of 3 of Roseville's older commercial corridors with vibrant and walkable streets, thriving businesses with retail and office spaces, community gathering spaces, and new housing options. The corridors we're focused on are Atlantic Street, Douglas Harding, and Douglas and Sunrise. And I'm here to give you background information before we get to the visioning and community values discussions that are coming later. Like, why these corridors and why now? What will these plans look like? And how does this work? So I'll move on to the next slide and we will, and it went backwards, and dive right in. So the first question is, why these corridors and why now? The city went through a process of setting up revitalization plans for Riverside and the city's downtown, and we've seen those be successful: beautified streetscapes, public amenities, and thriving businesses. So the City Council made working on further commercial corridors revitalization plans one of the goals in the city's strategic plan. And as we began looking at sites, these 3 areas jumped out because these are gateways into the city. I mean, for many folks traveling down Interstate 80, this may be the first point of contact as they come into the city. They may be coming down Atlantic Street or Douglas Boulevard into downtown, or even across the railroad tracks and go into the west of the city. Or they may be going east on Douglas Boulevard to go down to Folsom Lake, or to Mighty Regional Park, or to the hospital, or to the many offices and other places of work on that side of the city. So on top of the issue of these being gateway corridors, these are also in established neighborhoods and established commercial districts of the city that could use some revitalization and some attention. And on top of that, there are a lot of opportunities to realize quality of life improvements in these areas. Now, as for why now, that's partly because we competed for and were able to secure funding for planning exactly like this. So planning for these commercial corridors is funded by this grant. And so we are moving forward with this project using that grant funding, which is for the planning, I should emphasize. It does not cover construction. However, once you get a plan in place, then the city is better able to compete for construction grants if we are looking at doing, say, pedestrian improvements in the future. So what is a specific plan? A specific plan is a planning document that it gets organized into chapters and establishes a couple of key things. First, it states the broad vision and goals of the plan. It answers the questions, what outcome is the plan trying to achieve, and what does a successful plan look like? Next, it describes the land use plan. That is, what kinds of uses are allowed and where. Keeping in mind, of course, that these areas already have uses, they're already developed, and we don't want to create barriers for existing businesses and properties. We want to encourage reinvestment and new investment. Now, the other thing a specific plan does is establish design standards and streetscape plans that are tailored to the area. This is where we can set up standards and other guidelines that help us realize the vision of the plan. So if someone's going to develop a site, the plan will have established things like, should the building be more forward to the street? How deep or wide should the landscaping on the frontage be? And finally, the last key item is procedures. This is usually called the implementation chapter, and it sets up what kind of approval is needed for different types of projects. It also sets up incentives, for example, faster processes if they meet a certain design checklist. So a document like this is the end goal of the project. So how do we get from here to there? So the first step is what we're doing tonight, visioning. The city has looked at the existing land uses and land use designations in the area and considered constraints and opportunities, but we also need to reach out to the community, people who live, work, or own businesses in this area. We need to hear from you about what you think the needs are here, what you value here, so that we can put together what we're looking to do is put together a vision statement, a set of goals and policies, a land use plan, and some conceptual streetscape plans. Once we get your input so that we can put those together, then we would come back again in probably late summer, early fall of this year with concepts. So we would have a draft land use plan, we would have draft goals and policies for you, and we would have some conceptual streetscape plans for you to react to. And we would have another workshop just like this to get live feedback from you. We then take that live feedback and work on building out a complete draft plan for each of the corridors. So we'd have 3 specific plans, 1 for each corridor, and we'd look to release that in winter of this year, maybe rolling into early winter or winter of early next year. We would have more workshops after that, but at that point, we're looking at having workshops in front of the Planning Commission and City Council. Those wouldn't be hearings. There would be no decisions made at that time. It's purely an informational workshop to hear again from the community and from Planning Commission and City Council and get feedback. At that point, we would take all of that last feedback and wrap it into the development of a final draft plan for each of these corridors, which we would release in spring or maybe early summer of next year. So that's sort of the outreach process overview and how this is going to work moving forward. We did want to give you the opportunity to ask any questions you may have about this overview before we get into the details of the visioning and community values exercise. This is an opportunity to ask your sort of overarching questions about like what these documents are, how they work, and what the timeline is. Keeping in mind, one of the things we're doing is we're taking notes on all the questions we get and any comments we get, and we'll be using that to build a frequently asked questions page on our website so that you'll be able to refer back to that, and we'll be able to give you some answers to anything that comes up tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Gladys, and we're going to facilitate any questions you may have at this time on the materials that I've covered.
Thanks, Lauren. So we haven't received any questions yet in the chat box, but I know people were looking to, listening to your presentation. So if anybody has any questions that they'd either like to share in the chat box, or if you have any questions related to Lauren's presentation and you'd like to ask them verbally, please just raise your virtual hand and we will unmute you and give you the opportunity to ask any questions. So we'll just give it a minute or two to see if anybody has any questions before we go into the breakout room.
Yeah. And keeping in mind, again, the breakout rooms are where we're going to get into, be able to get into discussions about specific things in specific corridors that you're looking for. This is more of an opportunity for you to ask sort of those overarching questions that you might have.
So we did get a couple of questions. The first one is, will the historic value of existing structures be prioritized?
Well, and so that's one of those things that we would be looking for to hear from you as part of the values in any particular corridor. Is that something that you would like us to see draft a policy about in any of these corridors? So that's kind of the purpose. It's we aren't going into this presupposing what all of the programs and policies are going to look like. We're looking to hear from you about what all of you value about these areas and would like to see moving forward in the areas. So we can reflect on that and come back to you with policies and programs.
Thanks, Lauren. And then the other question was, will the city consider land use changes as part of this effort?
Yeah, to a certain extent, we're not looking to make massive changes that are going to constrain people's ability on sites, rather the opposite. We are looking at applying a lot more mixed use land use, so that for a commercial property, it wouldn't be only a certain subset of commercial uses. You could potentially have housing on a site that currently would only allow certain types of commercial uses. So we are looking at more mixed use, that and rectifying land use inconsistencies. That is, sometimes we have properties, especially in the older area, where the land use designation and the zoning designation don't match. And so we definitely want to correct things like that, because that can be a barrier to folks.
Okay. And then how does this process relate to the specific plans for these areas?
So this process, the one we're doing right now, the main value and function of that is that every specific plan has a vision and goals section that sort of lays out the plan and says, this is what a successful plan looks like. This is what we're trying to achieve with this plan. And so this part of the process is us asking you for feedback and input on what the vision and goals of the plans ought to be.
Okay. Okay, we have another question, and I'm just going to read it. I seem to be confused. You are asking for input on values, but the specific plan appears to have already been adopted back in 2006. Does our input make a difference?
So you're thinking, I think, of the downtown specific plan. So the downtown specific plan doesn't cover these areas. It covers Vernon Street and historic Old Town and Oak Street and some of those areas. These are entirely brand new specific plans. There's never been any kind of specific plan on these areas, on Atlantic Street, on Douglas and Harding, and on Douglas and Sunrise. There are no specific plans existing on those. So these are brand new plans for these areas.
Hopefully that clears that up. I'm not seeing any more questions, so we will move on to the small group work. So we're going to break up into small group discussions by splitting out into breakout rooms. Once the breakout rooms begin, you will be placed into one of these rooms with a group facilitator and other community members based upon your responses to our pre-meeting survey. If you didn't fill out a pre-meeting survey, that's okay. We are going to randomly put you into one of the breakout rooms. We do have a whole set of exercises that we'll be engaging with you in. So each breakout room will focus on one of the three corridors for the entire 55 minutes. After the time elapses, as I mentioned, everyone will be brought back here to the main room. Due to time constraints, we unfortunately won't be able to share what was discussed in the breakout rooms, but we will be providing a summary of the discussions on the project website. And if you registered, which you're here, so you did register for this meeting, we will have your email addresses. And so we will send a notification to let you know when it's been updated and the summary is there for your review. So the city did send out about 9,000 direct mail notifications to folks. Probably many of you had received that. it was to residents and property owners that were near each of the project areas. We wanted to encourage as much participation as possible, and we got some really great numbers of folks who agreed to participate. However, moving forward, when we have other meetings and other workshops that we're going to be doing, we are going to be relying on all of the emails that we've received so far. And then for anybody else who's interested in participating, we really would encourage you to sign up to get updates. And the website the website address is located right there. It's roseville.ca.us/corridor plans. And we would really appreciate it, since we already have your email address, if you would encourage your friends, families, neighbors to also sign up, so that we can notify them as we move forward with this effort. The other thing is, if you or your friends, family, neighbors want to provide additional information as it relates to this phase of the project, we are offering a virtual walking tour, and that is open starting, I believe, tomorrow afternoon. And you can participate in two ways. You can do it in the comfort of your home or other place virtually, or you can go literally walk the corridor, and there are different signs that show you kind of the areas that we would love to get your input on. So to participate in that, again, just go to the project website at roseville.ca.us/corridor plans, and you can get started there. And that will be open from the 10th through the 24th. And so again, we just encourage you, and then, please, share the information with everybody that you think would have an interest in participating. And so with that, I think we will let everyone go and enjoy their dinner, hopefully. But before we do that, I just want to check and see with Lauren, did you have any last words that you'd like to share?
Yeah, actually, I just want to thank everybody for participating tonight. When we set out to think about these corridor plans, it was really important to us that we reach out to the community, to business owners, to people who live here, to people who visit these areas, and hear from you about these plans and about these areas and about your vision for these areas. When we get robust community participation, the plans we develop are better. So I really appreciate everybody coming out tonight and spending the time with us and providing us with information. I know the room that I was in, we heard some really interesting things. You come up with ideas and you have perspectives that we needed to hear from. So I appreciate everybody's participation. And if you go ahead and do that virtual walking tour, I hope you think it's fun and helpful to you in giving us feedback.
Great. All right. Well, everybody, enjoy the rest of your evening, and we look forward to participating with you in future efforts here. So thank you and have a good evening.